Welcome back to the deep dive. Today isn't just another tech review. We aren't looking at the latest gadget drop or a quarterly earnings report from Silicon Valley.
No, not at all.
We are stepping back into a serialized analysis that we've touched on before, but today we are going right into the machinery of how the world actually works, or maybe how it's, stopping to work.
It's good to be back. And you're right, we are looking at the engine room today. And, usually when you look in the engine room of a modern nation state, you expect to see a lot of people pulling levers.
Right. You expect to see control.
Exactly. What we're going to discuss today is what happens when those levers disconnect from the gears.
That is a very unsettling image to start with. We are looking at part 27 of the AI Futures series. Now, for the longtime listeners, you know the drill, but for anyone new, I have to set the stage properly.
It's important to frame this right.
It really is, because the author, Jafar Humayun, is very specific about how this information should be consumed. He has a disclaimer that is practically a mantra for this series.
It is. It's a calibration tool, really. It sets your mindset before you dive in.
So let's calibrate. AI Futures is not a framework. It's a framework. This series explores how AI may unravel the systems we take for granted, not to alarm, but to challenge assumptions and spark deeper thinking about what comes next under maximum AI adoption.
I think emphasizing Jafar Humayun's intent there is it's crucial. We live in a media environment that loves alarmism. It really does. It loves the Terminator scenario.
The killer robots.
The killer robots, the dystopian futures. This isn't that. This is a structural audit. It's much less dramatic, but far more, I think, unsettling. It's like having a building inspector look at the foundation of a skyscraper and say, the concrete is curing differently than we thought.
It's not falling down tomorrow.
No, not necessarily. It's not necessarily going to collapse today,
Yeah.
but the physics of the building have changed. The fundamental assumptions we made are no longer valid.
And the specific focus of this installment, episode 27, is titled Innovation versus Sovereignty. The core mission here is to look at what Humayun calls the structural double bind facing modern nation-states.
Double bind. That is the operating phrase for the next hour. It's a psychological term, originally.
Right, from Gregory Bateson, I think.
Yeah, that's the one. It describes a situation where a person receives conflicting messages that negate each other, so that however they respond, they are wrong. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
And Humayun is taking that concept and applying it to
prime ministers and presidents of the world.
Yeah.
To the people who are supposedly in charge.
I want to start with the hook that Humayun uses right at the top of the source material. It stopped me in my tracks. I actually highlighted it in 3 different colors. He writes, governments aren't asleep, they're trapped.
It completely flips the script, doesn't it? It just turns the whole common narrative on its head.
It does, because, let's be honest, what is the standard dinner table conversation or the standard Twitter thread? When we talk about AI regulation, it usually goes like this. These politicians are dinosaurs.
They're out of touch.
They're 80 years old. They don't know how to open a PDF, let alone regulate a neural network. They are asleep at the wheel.
We love that narrative. We love the incompetence narrative. It's actually very comforting in a strange way.
How is it comforting to think our leaders are incompetent? That sounds, terrifying.
No, think about it. If the problem is that the person at the wheel is asleep, or stupid, or just plain lazy, then the solution is incredibly simple.
You get a new driver.
You wake them up. Or you vote them out and you replace them with someone smart and energetic. It implies that the problem is fixable through the ballot box. It implies that human agency is still the deciding factor. It's a problem of people.
Ah, I see. So if it's just incompetence, we can fix it. It's a personnel problem. But Humayun is saying something else entirely.
He's arguing something much more uncomfortable. He's saying, no, they aren't asleep. They are wide awake. They are reading the same briefing papers we are. They see the car crash coming.
But they can't turn the wheel.
They are structurally trapped in a vehicle where the steering wheel has been disconnected from the tires. They can turn it all they want, but the car keeps going straight.
This is what we're calling systemic entrapment.
Precisely. It's not a failure of personnel, it's a failure of mechanics.
Oh.
We are looking at a situation where the machinery of the state, the actual levers of power that a government uses to run a country, protect its borders, and enforce its laws, are being outpaced by algorithmic speed.
And this is the key part, effectively leased from private infrastructure.
That's the part that really changes the game.
So the thesis here is chilling. It's that our leaders are becoming, and I quote, sovereign in title, but least in execution.
Sovereign in title, least in execution. I really want you, the listener, to sit with that for a moment. Think about what that means. You have the title on the door, you have the flag on the desk, you have the motorcade,
All the symbols of power.
all the symbols, but the computer you use to execute your orders, the network that carries the command, you're just leasing that. Right. And the terms of service can change.
Wow. Okay, so let's walk through how we got here. Humayun starts with Section 1, the appearance of control versus the reality of force. He kicks it off with this idea of the invisible industrial revolution.
Right. And to understand the invisible one, we have to look back at the visible one. Think back to the first industrial revolution. Manchester, Pittsburgh, the Ruhr Valley.
You can picture it immediately. Smokestacks, coal dust, grime.
Exactly. It was visceral, it was loud, it smelled. You could physically point to a factory and say, that is where the change is happening, that building. And because it was physical, it existed within geography.
It was on a map.
It was on a map. A factory sits on soil. That soil belongs to a nation. If that factory pollutes the river, the local sheriff or the king or the EPA can ride out there and shut the gates. The state had physical leverage over the means of production.
But AI isn't a factory in Pittsburgh. It doesn't have a physical address.
No. AI reshapes economies with that same force, arguably much more force. But it is invisible. It's software-driven. It is unconstrained by physical borders. It moves through fiber optic cables and satellite link. It doesn't have a zip code. It's everywhere and nowhere at once.
So if the force of change is invisible, what happens to the government? This is where Humayun talks about the illusion of the podium.
This is such a great image. Think about a standard press conference. You see the president or the prime minister standing behind a podium. There's the national seal. There are flags on either side. They look powerful.
They look in command.
They are issuing policy statements. We will prioritize safety. We will ensure fairness in AI. We are launching a new national initiative. It looks like they are in charge.
It's a very comforting piece of theater.
That's what it is. It suggests that the state is still the primary driver of national destiny. But Humayun's argument is that behind those policy statements, the state is actually cornered by the system itself. The reality of force has shifted. The things that actually change people's lives, how they work, how they communicate, what information they see, how their credit score is calculated.
The day-to-day fabric of life.
Right. None of that is being decided at that podium.
They are being decided in server farms in Northern Virginia or data centers in Iceland or, wherever the cloud happens to be that day.
Correct. They are decided by optimization functions in code repositories that the person at the podium doesn't own, likely doesn't have access to, and almost certainly doesn't understand the mathematical nuance of.
So the podium is for show. The real action is in the server room.
Pretty much.
And this leads to a shift in how governments even talk about their plans. The source material highlights a change in terminology that I hadn't really noticed until I read this. We used to hear constantly about an innovation agenda.
Right. Remember 10, maybe 15 years ago? Every city had an innovation agenda. Silicon Roundabout, Silicon Prairie, Silicon Beach.
It sounded so positive, so proactive.
It did. An agenda implies agency. It implies I have a list of things I want to do, and I am going to go do them. We will build a tech hub here. We will invest in biotech. It's a plan.
And now?
Now, according to Humayun, we're moving from an innovation agenda to an existential gamble.
That is a dark pivot. An agenda is a to-do list. A gamble is, well, it's closing your eyes and rolling the dice.
It is less fun, but it's a more honest description of the stakes. Because AI isn't just a vertical sector. It's not like, oh, we need a policy for the auto industry, or we need to regulate the price of milk.
Right.
AI is a horizontal technology. It's a layer that sits on top of everything else.
Yeah.
It rewrites productivity, it rewrites employment, it rewrites communication, it rewrites sovereignty, all simultaneously.
So a government isn't just tweaking one sector of the economy. They're putting the chips of their entire society on the table.
Exactly. If you get the AI transition wrong, you don't just lose a few tech jobs. You might destabilize your labor market, your information ecosystem, and your national security all at once. The blast radius is total.
Okay, so if the stakes are that high, if it's an existential gamble, the natural question, the one I think every listener is screaming right now is, why can't they just fix it?
Right.
Why can't the U.S. government or the EU or China just pass a law and say stop or slow down? Why are they helpless?
And that brings us to the absolute heart of the paper, Section 2, the double bind of policy.
Let's really unpack this because double bind can sound a bit academic. What does it look like in practice for a real country?
A double bind is a situation where you are presented with two options, and both of them lead to a negative outcome. There's no good choice. There's no clean escape.
It's a lose-lose.
It is. And in the context of AI policy, Humayun identifies the binary choice facing every nation-state today. Option A is regulation. Option B is acceleration.
Okay, let's role play this. I'm the prime minister of, let's say, a mid-sized developed country. I want to be responsible. I'm worried. I look at the risks of deepfakes, job loss, algorithmic bias. I choose option A. I say, this is too fast. I am going to regulate the hell out of this.
Okay.
We are putting up strict guardrails. We are pausing training runs larger than a certain size. We're mandating transparency. What happens to me? What happens to my country?
If you do that alone, if you do that while the rest of the world keeps racing ahead, you get branded anti-growth almost immediately. But more importantly, you face what Humayun calls innovation flight.
Innovation flight. That sounds like capital flight, but for ideas.
It is capital flight, but faster and maybe more permanent. Capital is fluid, but top-tier talent is even more mobile. If your country becomes a hard place to build AI, if there's too much red tape, the venture capital leaves overnight. The brilliant PhDs from your universities, they get on a plane. The startups move to a jurisdiction that is friendlier, maybe a rival nation, maybe a digital haven like Dubai or Singapore.
So I lose the tax base, I lose the talent pool, I lose the next generation of companies.
You lose the future. That's the narrative. You effectively sideline your nation from the most important economic engine of the century. You become a museum. A very nice, safe, well-regulated museum where nothing new happens.
Ouch. Okay, that sounds terrible. I don't want to be a museum. I want to be a leader. So I change my mind. I choose option B. I choose acceleration.
Full speed ahead.
Full steam ahead. Let's win the AI race. Deregulate everything. Let's build the biggest clusters. We'll offer tax breaks, cheap power, whatever it takes. What happens then?
Then you fuel what the source calls structural hollowing. You accelerate job displacement before you have any kind of social safety net in place.
So mass unemployment.
Potentially. Or at least massive painful disruption. You deepen inequality because the gains from that acceleration flow to a very small number of people who own the models. You erode privacy. And ultimately, you weaken your own autonomy because you are handing over more and more control of your society's core functions to the private systems you are accelerating. You break the social contract with your own citizens.
So if I regulate, I lose my economic future. If I accelerate, I risk breaking the society I'm supposed to protect.
Exactly. That is the double bind. If you stop, you become irrelevant on the global stage. If you run, you risk internal collapse.
Is there really no neutral ground, no middle path? Can't I just regulate a little bit? You know, like we do with cars. We have speed limits, but we still have Ferraris. We have seatbelt laws.
That's the friction point. And it's a great question. The source material argues that there is effectively no neutral ground because of the global nature of the competition. It's a prisoner's dilemma played out at the scale of nation.
The prisoner's dilemma. The classic game theory problem.
Right. If everyone agreed to slow down, if the US, China, the EU, India, all the major players held hands and said, let's pause and figure this out together, we could have a middle path. We could have sensible regulation.
But that requires trust. A lot of it.
An impossible amount of trust. Because if even one major player decides to accelerate, to cheat, everyone else is forced to respond or be left behind militarily and economically. The logic of the system forces you to choose speed, even if you hate it, even if you know it's dangerous.
It feels like a trap.
It is a trap. It's a structural trap. That's why Humayun says they aren't asleep, they're trapped. They know that slowing down is the moral choice, perhaps, but accelerating is the survival choice in a competitive world.
And this trap isn't just about laws and bills in Parliament. It's about the very ground the government stands on. Which leads us to the next layer of this onion, private sector infrastructure leverage.
This is Section 3. And this part really, I think, challenges the definition of what a government is in 2026. What does it actually do?
The source points out that we have moved from state-owned infrastructure to privatized infrastructure. And we're not just talking about, a private company managing a toll road. We are talking about the rails the country runs on.
Think about it historically. In the 20th century, the state built the highways. The state built the dams. The state often owned the phone lines, or at least heavily regulated them as public utilities like Ma Bell.
The government owned the assets that made the nation function.
Right. They had direct physical control. If there was a crisis, a war, a natural disaster, the government controlled the infrastructure. They could prioritize it, they could shut it down, they could direct it.
And now?
Now, just look at the list of public services that are effectively outsourced to tech giants via cloud contracts. Public services, running on the cloud. Digital identity, often managed by private vendors, security. So much of cyber defense is in the hands of private companies.
I mean, look at Ukraine. That's become the classic example now, hasn't it?
It's the definitive example. You had a sovereign nation at war, and their critical communications infrastructure, Starlink, was provided by a private American company. And at certain points, the CEO of that company had to make decisions about where the service would work and where it wouldn't.
Decisions with huge geopolitical consequences.
Exactly. That is a privatization of geostrategy. It's a function that used to belong exclusively to a head of state or a general.
It's pervasive. Even the government's own data, the tax records, the census data, even classified information, it's not in a filing cabinet in the basement of the Capitol anymore.
No, it's sitting on servers owned by Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud. The CIA uses commercial cloud providers. The Pentagon uses commercial cloud providers.
So national prestige, and more importantly, national capability, is no longer about what the state owns. It is tethered to the adoption of tools the state licenses.
Leased in execution. There it is again. The state doesn't own the engine. It's just paying a subscription fee like the rest of us.
Which means it can be turned off.
It means it's a massive leverage point. If the tech giant decides to change the terms of service, or if they raise their prices, or if they suffer a massive outage, or if the tech giant's home government disagrees with your policy, the state is incredibly vulnerable.
The source calls this the financial and narrative leash. Let's break that down.
This is the psychological barrier to regulation. It's not just that the tech companies lobby with money. We always focus on lobbying money, and it's a factor, sure. But Humayun argues the narrative leash is much, much stronger.
How does that work? How is a story more powerful than a briefcase full of cash?
Because the narrative has been set. The equation in the public mind, and more importantly in the investor mind, is this. Supporting AI equals progress. Regulating AI equals fear-based politics.
I've seen this play out 100 times. If a politician stands up and says, we need to pause training of large models, the immediate reaction isn't, oh, that's thoughtful, let's consider the risks.
The reaction is, you're killing the economy. You're a Luddite. You're holding back the future.
And the market reacts instantly. This is the investor blowback part.
Right. If a government even signals aggressive regulation, their tech sector stocks take a hit. The currency might wobble. Investors get nervous. In a world where economic metrics are the primary scorecard for political success, crashing your own tech sector is political suicide.
So if you are the president and your advisors tell you that signing a regulation bill will drop the NASDAQ by 10% and make you look like a dinosaur on the evening news,
You hesitate.
you hesitate. You form a committee instead. You launch a study. You buy time.
And then there's the other side of it, the viral media framing.
Right. The tech sector is incredibly good at storytelling. They sell utopia. We are curing cancer. We are solving climate change. We're creating abundance for all.
It's a powerful story.
It's the most powerful story. If you try to regulate that, the narrative immediately becomes that you are an old, out-of-touch bureaucrat standing in the way of the Star Trek future. You become the villain in the story of human advancement. It's a PR nightmare. So the leash holding the government back is financial. They need the growth. They fear the market backlash. But the cage they are in is psychological. They are terrified of being the bad guy in the story of progress.
Humayun quotes a strategist who says, no party wants to be the one that held back the future. That fear, that single sentence, paralyzes them.
But even if they wanted to act, let's just say we found a brave politician, a real unicorn, someone willing to take the hit to the stock market, willing to ignore the mean tweets, willing to fight the narrative. There's another problem, a mechanical problem.
The tempo mismatch.
This is Section 4, Policy in Slow Motion. This feels like the most practical, nuts and bolts reason why things are failing. It's not about fear or politics. It's just about speed.
It's the velocity gap. And it is arguably the most fatal flaw in modern democracy when it's applied to exponential technology. Our systems were not built for this.
Let's break down the two timelines, because I think people complain about how slow government is, but we don't really visualize the calendar.
Okay, let's do it. Look at a legislative cycle. How does a law get made? First, there's an issue. An article comes out, a problem appears.
Yeah.
Then there are committee hearings, experts are called.
That takes months.
Months, easily. Then there are debates. Then the actual drafting of the bill. Then voting. Then reconciliation between the two houses of Parliament or Congress. Then presidential sign-off. Then the agency has to write the rules for implementation.
And then the inevitable lawsuits.
And the lawsuits, which can tie it up for years more. This is a process measured in years. sometimes decades. The EU AI Act is a prime example. It was first proposed way back in 2021.
Okay, so that's timeline A, years. Now what's timeline B, AI evolution?
Timeline B is measured in months, sometimes weeks. Look at the EU AI Act again. It was first proposed in 2021. The draft was debating things like social scoring and facial recognition in public places.
Important topics, but very specific.
Right. And then, while they were still debating those things, ChatGPT dropped in late 2022. Suddenly, the entire global conversation shifted to generative AI, large language models, copyright hallucinations, prompt engineering.
A completely different set of problems.
The law they had spent 2 years writing was suddenly addressing the previous generation of problems. They had to scramble to rewrite it, to stick new chapters on.
It reminds me of that concept for military strategy, the leapfrog effect.
That's exactly what it is. By the time a democratic consensus is reached and a law is physically signed, the technology has leapfrogged the regulation. The law is obsolete the moment the ink dries.
It's like writing a strict set of rules for horse-drawn carriages in 1915, just as the Model T is rolling off the assembly line.
Perfect analogy. You regulated a ghost.
And in the meantime, the damage is already done.
Right. The displacement has already scaled. The jobs are already gone or have fundamentally changed. Public trust has already frayed because people see the government fighting the last war, not the current one. We are using 20th century tools committees, white papers, floor debates to try and catch 21st century disruption that moves at the speed of software.
It's like bringing a typewriter to a cyber war.
It's worse. It's like bringing a committee meeting to a cyber war. The committee meeting is a beautiful democratic tool. It's designed for consensus. It's designed for deliberation. It is fundamentally not designed for speed. And AI is pure speed.
So we have the appearance of control, the double bind, the privatization of the rails, and the slow motion policy. This leads us to Section 5, which I think is the most philosophical part of this deep dive. Redefining sovereignty in silence.
This is where we have to really step back and look at what sovereignty actually means when you strip away the technology. What does it mean to be a nation in 2026?
The source lists the 4 pillars of control. Traditionally, if you are a sovereign nation, you control 4 things: your borders, your currency, your laws, and your culture.
That's the classic Westphalian definition of a state. If you control those 4 things, you are a state. If you don't, you're just a territory with a flag.
Huh.
But let's look at how AI disrupts each and every one of them. This is what Hume calls upstream control.
Okay, let's take borders first. That seems physical enough. We build walls, we have checkpoints, we have customs agents.
Traditionally, yes. You guard your physical borders to control what comes in and out: people, goods, weapons. But AI dissolves borders because the back office systems and the data flows are completely globalized. An AI agent working for a company in your country might be running on a server in another country, processing data from a third country using a model trained in a fourth.
And you can't stop the data at the border.
You can try. You can build a great firewall. But increasingly, the intelligence itself, the actual decision-making capability, is cloud native. It's fluid. The border is irrelevant to the flow of intelligence. You can't put a customs agent on a data packet.
Okay, pillar 2, currency. This one really confuses me a bit. The dollar is still the dollar, the euro is still the euro.
For now, yes. But sovereignty usually means you have the sole right to print your own money and control its value through a central bank. But as we move deeper into this AI-powered economy, we are seeing the rise of tokens and, more importantly, compute credits.
Compute credits, you mean access to processing power.
Exactly. Think about it. In an AI-driven world, the most valuable resource isn't oil or gold anymore. It's compute, the raw processing power needed to train and run the models. We are seeing markets emerge where compute is traded like a commodity. If a huge portion of economic value is generated by AI agents trading with each other using digital tokens or compute credits, the central bank's control over the money supply becomes much more abstract.
So if the real economy runs on compute, and you don't control the supply of compute because it's owned by NVIDIA or Microsoft or Amazon, do you really control your economy?
That is the trillion-dollar question. You might control the fiat currency people use to buy bread, but the actual currency of power and economic production has shifted.
Pillar 3, law. This one feels a little closer to home.
This is a scary one. Law, as we understand it, implies that a human judge interprets a rule based on precedent and context and reason. But we're rapidly moving toward enforcement that is delegated to black box models.
We see this in so many areas already. Predictive policing.
Predictive policing, sentencing guidelines, loan approvals, insurance premiums, security clearances. The list is endless. If an algorithm decides who gets bail or who gets a loan or who gets flagged as a security risk, and that algorithm is a complex neural network that even its own creators don't fully understand, is that law? Or is that just mathematical probability applied as force?
If you can't appeal to a reason, if you can't explain why you were denied a loan, is it a legal process?
Exactly. The rule of law implies transparency. It implies you can face your accuser and understand the charge. Black box AI is the opposite of transparency. It is an opaque oracle. And if the state relies on that oracle to enforce order, the very nature of law has changed.
And that leaves pillar 4, culture.
This one is subtle, but maybe the most profound. Culture is carried by language. It's carried by the stories we tell, the art we create, the way we communicate. And right now, the large language models, the things writing our emails, our scripts, our news summaries, teaching our children, are overwhelmingly trained on English language data.
And not just English, but a specific slice of it.
A very specific slice.
Yeah.
Western values, and even more specifically, Silicon Valley sensibilities, because that's where most of the easily scrapable internet data comes from. But as these models become the default interface for the world, they have a flattening effect on local cultures. They impose a homogenized worldview.
So if you are a smaller nation with a unique language or dialect, and the AI doesn't speak it well or doesn't understand your cultural context,
Your culture becomes second class in the digital realm. You are forced to adopt the global standard to participate, which is really just the California standard in disguise.
So to summarize this section, the flag still waves over the Capitol building. The anthem still plays at sporting events. But the logic governing the nation, the flow across borders, the creation of value, the enforcement of rules, the production of culture, is being licensed, coded, and stored on a server somewhere else.
That is upstream control, in a nutshell. The government is downstream. The real decisions are happening upstream, in the code, in the data centers. The government is just managing the output.
This is heavy stuff. And it makes me wonder, if this is all happening, if we are losing our sovereignty, if the rails are privatized, if the leaders are trapped, why aren't people in the streets? Why aren't voters demanding a slowdown?
This brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Section 6, tactical realism and strategic paralysis.
The voter dilemma. Why aren't we, the people, pulling the emergency brake?
Because, frankly, the passengers like the ride, for the most part.
We do like the ride. It's convenient.
AI is marketed as convenience. It's cool. It writes your emails for you. It makes funny images of your cat. It plans your vacation. On a deeper level, it discovers new drugs and makes science more efficient. And on a national level, tech is equated with national strength. We want our country to be the leader. We want to beat the other guys.
So if a politician says, we need to stop this, they aren't heard as a savior protecting our sovereignty. They are heard as a killjoy who wants to take away the cool new toys.
Exactly. Regulation sounds like obstruction. It sounds like making life harder and less fun. The political cost is immense. No leader gains political capital by suggesting a slowdown.
Their opponents will kill them for it.
Immediately. They will reframe that caution as incompetence or weakness. Look at him. He's afraid of the future. He's weak. Or worse, the killer argument. He's letting our enemies get ahead. While we slow down in debate, China is speeding up. That is a powerful, almost unbeatable political argument.
So the government isn't apathetic. They see what's happening. But they respond with what the source calls tactical realism.
Right. They realize they can't stop the train, so they try to make the ride a little smoother. They do things that look like they're taking action. They fund reskilling initiatives.
Which, let's be honest, often have a very unclear return on investment. The advice to learn to code isn't great when the AI can code better than most humans.
It's often performative. It's a way to show you're doing something about job losses. Or they create AI task forces.
Which usually have no enforcement teeth. They write reports. I have read so many of these reports. They are very well written. They have great recommendations. And they change almost nothing. They sit on a shelf.
Or the latest trend, they offer regulatory sandboxes. Come play in our sandbox where the rules are relaxed. But these things never scale to the actual economy. They are little pockets of permission, not a comprehensive strategy.
So these actions, they're not really solving the problem. Humayun calls this strategic paralysis.
Yes, the actions, the task forces, the reports, the sandboxes, they look like action. They're tactically useful. They allow the government to say we are doing something. But they are really just attempts to buy time. They are trying to avoid immediate collapse while hoping that maybe, somehow, they can figure out a structural solution later on.
They are kicking the can down the road.
They are buying time, but the price of that time is going up every single day.
And time isn't neutral in this race.
No.
Mm.
Every month they delay structural reform, the AI gets stronger, the integration into society gets deeper, and the leverage of the state gets weaker. The longer you wait to regulate the landlord, the more keys to your building the landlord owns.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground here. We've gone from the invisible revolution to the double bind to the privatization of the state, the velocity gap, and the silent redefinition of sovereignty.
It's a comprehensive picture of entrapment. It explains why things feel the way they do right now, why governments seem so powerless.
So, how do we wrap this all up? The outro focuses on a final synthesis, and the headline here is stark, really. It's Innovation Won.
For now, yes. If we look at the scoreboard of the last decade, innovation has beaten sovereignty, hands down.
The battle isn't good versus bad governance. It's not about finding better politicians.
No, that's the most important takeaway for you, the listener. Stop thinking in terms of good politicians versus bad politicians. Stop looking for a villain to blame. This is a battle between outdated state mechanics and borderless algorithmic speed.
One is static, geographic, and slow, designed in the 18th century. The other is fluid, global, and instant, designed in the 21st.
And until the mechanics change, until we have new models of governance, maybe decentralized governance, maybe international coalitions that actually have teeth, governments will remain in this state.
Which is what?
Active, but ineffective.
Yeah.
Informed, but outpaced.
And to bring it back to that core thesis from the very beginning, sovereign in title, but least in execution.
It's a sobering reality. We are living in nations that are, in a very real sense, becoming subscribers to their own infrastructure.
Which leads us to the final provocative thought for the listener. This is the question we want you to carry with you after you take your headphones off today. Lay it on us.
The question Humayun leaves us with is this. If the levers of national power are increasingly coded into software licensed from elsewhere, at what point does a state stop being an independent actor and start becoming a subscriber to its own future?
That is going to keep me up tonight. Becoming a subscriber to your own future, it implies you can be unsubscribed.
That's the risk. If you miss a payment or violate the terms of service, what happens to your nation?
Well, on that cheerful note, we do have to wrap up. But don't worry, we aren't leaving you in the abyss completely. We are continuing this journey.
That's right. This isn't the end of the story. It's just one piece of the analysis.
Up next is Part 28, Centralized AI, Fragmented World. We are going to explore whether local adaptation and decentralized models can reclaim agency before the window of sovereignty closes for good. Is there a way out of the trap? We'll find out next time.
I'm looking forward to that one. It's a critical question.
Stay tuned, stay curious, stay systemic.